Today's case is one that shocked Australia and sparked national outrage, a heartbreaking story of faith taken to the extreme, parental neglect, and a child who never got the chance to grow up. This is the tragic case of Elizabeth Struhs, the discovery of a heartbreaking crime. Welcome to True Crime Investigator, where we bring you compelling stories of crime, mystery, and justice. Sit back, stay curious, and let's get into today's case. On January 7, 2022, emergency services in Toowoomba, Queensland, responded to a distressing call. When they arrived at a modest home on Rangewood Avenue, they were met with a horrific scene: the lifeless body of 8-year-old Elizabeth Rose Struhs. But something was off from the very beginning. The paramedics immediately noticed that Elizabeth had been dead for some time. Days, in fact. This wasn't a sudden accident or a medical emergency gone wrong. Instead, what they uncovered sent shockwaves across Australia. Elizabeth Struhs, a child diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, had been denied her life-saving insulin for nearly a week. Instead of receiving medical treatment, she had been forced to rely on nothing but prayer. Her parents, Jason and Carrie Struhs, were strict fundamentalist Christians who believed in divine healing over modern medicine. Instead of seeking urgent help for their daughter, they had deliberately withheld her insulin, watching as she grew weaker, slipped into a coma, and eventually died. The police quickly launched an investigation, but what they discovered went beyond anything they expected. Elizabeth's parents weren't the only ones responsible for her death. 12 other people had a hand in it too. Who were the Struhs? The religious extremism behind the crime. To understand what happened, we need to take a closer look at Jason and Carrie Struhs and the religious group they followed. The Struhs family were members of a tiny, secretive religious sect that operated outside of mainstream Christianity. This group, led by self-proclaimed prophet Brendan Stevens, rejected medical treatment, believing that true faith in God meant trusting Him to heal any illness, without doctors, hospitals, or medication. To them, seeking medical help was a sin. It meant a lack of faith, a betrayal of God's ability to heal. They believed that if you put your trust in doctors instead of prayer, you were turning your back on divine intervention. Elizabeth had been diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, a condition that requires daily insulin injections to regulate blood sugar levels. Without insulin, a diabetic person can experience diabetic ketoacidosis, DKA, a painful and dangerous condition where the body starts breaking down fat as fuel, leading to a buildup of toxic acids in the bloodstream. It is agonizing. It is fatal if untreated. When Elizabeth's condition worsened, her parents made the chilling decision to stop her insulin entirely. Instead of taking her to the hospital, they gathered members of their religious group and began to pray over her. For 6 days, they prayed. As Elizabeth's body weakened, her organs failing, her pain increasing, they did nothing but watch. Even as she lost consciousness, as her breath became shallower, they continued. She had seizures. She had trouble breathing. She slipped into a coma. And still, they prayed. By the time Elizabeth took her final breath, her parents and their group had convinced themselves that her death was God's will. The arrests, holding 14 people accountable. It wasn't Jason or Carrie Struhs who called emergency services. When paramedics arrived, Elizabeth had already been dead for 24 hours. The authorities were notified by an outsider, someone who wasn't part of the group. Police began questioning not just her parents, but also 12 other adults who had been present during Elizabeth's final days. And in a shocking move, police arrested all 14 members of the religious group, charging them with murder, manslaughter, and child cruelty. This case was one of the largest mass arrests for a single child homicide in Australian history. Among those arrested was Brendan Stevens, the group's leader, who had convinced the others that relying on medicine was a sign of weak faith. During police interviews, some members defended their actions, stating that they truly believed God would bring Elizabeth back to life. It was beyond disturbing. The public outrage and the debate on religious freedom. The case sparked outrage across Australia and beyond. Many were horrified that faith had been used as an excuse for neglect. How could a child's life be sacrificed in the name of religious belief? Where do we draw the line between faith and criminal responsibility? There were widespread debates about parental rights, medical neglect, and the limits of religious freedom. While Australia recognizes freedom of religion, that freedom does not extend to endangering a child's life. The laws were clear. Parents have a legal responsibility to provide necessary medical care. And yet there had been warning signs. This wasn't the first case of faith-based medical neglect in Australia. In 2019, a couple in New South Wales was convicted of manslaughter after refusing to get medical treatment for their daughter, who died of severe malnutrition and infection. In the United States, similar cases have been documented, particularly in fundamentalist sects that believe in faith healing. In Idaho, laws protecting faith-based medical neglect have allowed dozens of children to die unnecessarily from treatable illnesses. These cases have led to calls for stricter child protection laws that prevent religious beliefs from being used as a shield against criminal responsibility. But despite the outrage, many religious groups continue to defend their right to reject medical treatment, and that raises a terrifying question. How many other children are suffering right now because of religious extremism? Elizabeth's legacy. What can be done? In the aftermath of Elizabeth's tragic death, activists and lawmakers pushed for stronger child protection laws in Australia. Some argued that religious exemptions for medical neglect should be completely abolished. Others called for mandatory medical checkups for children in religious communities to prevent similar tragedies. But the real question remains: will anything actually change? Elizabeth Struhs should have never died. Her condition was treatable, manageable, and completely preventable. But her parents, their religious leader, and 12 other adults chose prayer over medicine. They watched as she suffered. They prayed as she died. And they did nothing to save her. What do you think? Should faith-based medical neglect be treated as murder? Should government step in when parents refuse life-saving treatment for their children? Or do parents have the right to make those decisions, even if it leads to death? This tragic case is not just about the Struhs family. It's about how religious extremism can turn deadly. It's about how laws must protect the most vulnerable. And most of all, it's about a little girl who should still be alive today. Her name was Elizabeth Struhs, and she deserved so much better. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to stay updated on crime cases like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Thanks for watching. Until next time, stay aware, stay informed, and stay safe.